Hey everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and today I want to talk about some of my favorite audiobooks. So over the last few years, I've gotten really into listening to audiobooks. I discovered that I could in fact focus. I used to think I couldn't. I used to think that audiobooks were just not something that would work for me because my mind wanders very easily. I would be too distracted to follow the story. But as it turns out, I'm not as distracted when the audiobook is sped up. So if I'm listening at one, I can't focus on that. It's too slow. My mind will wander all over the place and I'll have no idea what's happening in the story. But if I go up to 2 speed, I can focus. And sometimes I can go up to 3. Depending on the narrator. So anyway, I love audiobooks now because I find, especially if I can do them in tandem with a physical book, where I can read with my eyes while I'm listening with my ears, that keeps me focused. I'm really bad, especially since 2020, my mind cannot hold on to things as well as it used to. I am so distractible. And I have found that audiobooks have helped me to really focus on what I'm reading. And I just want to share some of my love for audiobooks with you today by sharing some of my favorites. So I have 4 categories of audiobook for you, and these are just things that I enjoy in audiobooks. They may not be the things that you specifically enjoy in audiobooks, and that is okay. But these are things that I look for in an audiobook. I want to start with memoirs that are read by the author. This is the best way, I think, to experience a memoir, because it's basically like having a person tell you their life story directly to you. I think that's the best way to experience it. So my favorite memoirs I've read as audiobooks are Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This was probably my first audiobook, I think, way back a couple of years ago. I got my Audible subscription and I got it specifically to listen to this book because I had heard that it was a really good audiobook and I wanted to try audiobooks again, so I wanted to choose one that I thought would be the best option for me. So I got this audiobook, and I'm 99.9% sure this was my very first audiobook I listened to all the way through. And it was such a good experience, and it's what made me kind of fall in love with the medium of audiobooks. If you're not familiar, this book is just Trevor Noah talking about his childhood in South Africa and how he was considered a crime because his parents were white and black. So that wasn't supposed to happen. It was a crime to do that. So him being biracial and his experiences growing up in South Africa and all of that. And it was fascinating. And also, I love his accent. I love listening to him talk. He is such an interesting person. So this was an excellent audiobook to start with. Then I want to talk about Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. Because I had such a good experience with Born a Crime, I immediately listened to this after that. I listened to these back to back, I'm pretty sure. And I loved both of them so much. Caitlin Doughty is a fascinating person. I'm a morbid soul. I love reading books about death. I love, thinking about the concept of death and dead bodies and, what happens to a body once it's dead and, that sort of thing. So this was a really interesting book to listen to. This is Caitlin Doughty talking about, how she came to, work in the death industry and, what that experience is like. So if that's something you're interested in, Caitlin Doughty is fantastic. I love her. I love her work. I want to read more of her work. I love her videos and stuff. So, very cool person. And then the next, I don't know if I can consider this a memoir. It feels memoir adjacent, and that is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This is a series of essays that he wrote where he reviews things, and he reviews all these different things and his life and just his favorite things like Dr. Pepper and stuff like that. And it's just really interesting. I love John Green. I adore the Green Brothers. They're some of my favorite humans. And so I loved listening to John talk about like his anxiety and his teen years and like all these different things, like being a writer. And I just found it all endlessly fascinating and loved the experience of listening to this on audio. So the next category I want to talk about is just great narrators. Like, there are some really talented audiobook narrators, and these are books that I just thought were such a great experience because of how good the narration was. So the first I want to talk about is the Hunger Games trilogy. Now, I'd read these with my eyes several times prior to this, but the year I was getting my implant was the year we like really had to embrace audiobooks as read-alouds in our homeschool because I just couldn't do it. I had to wear like a thing and it made it hard to talk, and like it was an ordeal. So we listened to a lot of audiobooks that year, and that was also the year that I wanted to introduce Regina to the Hunger Games. I had no idea how good the audiobooks were going to be. These were narrated by Tatiana Maslany, which if you've ever like seen her work, like I watched Orphan Black. I think we only made it through like the first season though. We need to go back and rewatch the rest of it, but she's amazing. So she does all these different, like, I am endlessly fascinated by people who can do so many different things with their voice. She did so many different voices and they all sounded so distinctly different. I was captivated. Like, her narration is spectacular. Like, she should win an award for that. And maybe she did. I don't know. But, like, it was brilliant and I loved it. So if you've never listened to the Hunger Games on audio, I highly recommend looking for the ones narrated by Tatiana Maslany because they were spectacular. Next, I want to talk about Project Hail Mary. So I've raved about this before. You've heard me. I don't need to tell you more about what this is because I've talked about it incessantly. This was my favorite book of the year a few years ago. But I thought the audiobook of this is so superior to the physical. Like, if you're gonna experience Project Hail Mary, you absolutely need to read it with your ears. You need to listen to the audiobook because, let me tell you, that is one fantastic narrator. So it's narrated by Ray Porter, and I've never listened to an audiobook narrated by him before, and I went to go look up something after to see what else he's done, and honestly none of those books were interesting to me. So I'm probably, I don't know, maybe someday, but like he does such a good job with the narration for this, and like he's so entertaining, and it's really like a one-man show anyway because this is a story about being in isolation in space and like figuring out why you're there, but like he does all these other voices too and they were all so good. Like, it's the best way to experience Project Hail Mary, I think. Like, after listening to it, I was like, what would I have loved this as much if I'd read it with my eyes? And I don't know that I would have. So I think that speaks volumes. The next book I want to talk about is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. So this is narrated by January Lavoie, who is not a narrator I'd ever heard of before, but she does a spectacular job of Thistlefoot because, again, I love when someone can do different character voices and they sound distinctly different enough that I am not like distracted. Like, I sometimes find it difficult to hear different characters when they all sound the same. So like, I've listened to audiobooks where there was like multiple characters that the narrator did not change their voice for, and it got confusing because like, wait, who am I listening to? You know? So like, having a narrator who can change their voice is just excellent, and this one had such a great quality to it with when the house would narrate, it had an accent, and I loved the audio of this. I thought it was a fantastic listening experience. So moving on to full cast and great production value, and I mean, you could argue Project Hail Mary would fall into this category too, because while it is just one narrator, it had an excellent production value. But these are books that all had multiple narrators. So you had a full cast. Every character gets a different narrator. And I think that makes such a big difference. Like, I love when one person, like Tatiana Maslany is a one-woman show and she's amazing, but I love the experience of having completely different people narrating as well. So let's kick it off with one of my absolute favorite audiobooks of all time, The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. If you're going to read this book, I absolutely recommend doing the audio because it is a full cast. It has music. It has so much going on, but done in a way that isn't like too I've listened to things that were full cast that had music that was just like too much and my brain could not process. This was like absolutely perfect. So this is Tiffany D. Jackson's Carrie retelling. I've talked about it before, fairly recently, I think, but like the audio of this is so entertaining. I don't know that I would have enjoyed, that's not true. I think I still would have enjoyed the book as much if I just read with my eyes, but the experience of having the audio, of having all the different narrators, of having like the journalism element, there's like some podcasty stuff happening in it, and so like all of those things together made this such a great experience. So I highly recommend the audio for that. Next, I want to talk about Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a book that's meant to be listened to, I feel like. The actual physical book is written in interview format, and it feels like an episode of Behind the Music on VH1, where you're seeing someone interview all the members of the band. And like what happened to them, like why did the band break up, like all the things that like went into starting the band, their success and their ultimate demise. So the audiobook is a full cast and it's such a great experience. It was so good, and I listened to that whole book in a day because I just like could not stop. I wanted to keep listening because it was so fascinating. I love stuff like this. I used to be obsessed with VH1 Behind the Music. That was one of my favorite shows of like all time because it was so endlessly fascinating to me. Like the idea of a band and like what happened to them and how they became successful and how it all fell apart and all of that. I really enjoyed that. So having that in book format, but also as the audio, I just found it incredibly entertaining. And then my last recommendation for a full cast audiobook, that is Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. And I listened to that in December because I felt like it would be a good holiday book. And it was a great listening experience. Full cast, so you have all these different characters. It's a wacky story anyway. Like all the Discworld books are pretty wacky because there's just a lot of pieces and puzzle pieces, you know? Like there's so many different things happening in different ways and they all connect, but like it doesn't feel like they all connect until you're like halfway through. Well, Hogfather is very much like that, but because I had the audio and because the production was so good, like it was such a great experience. So Hogfather is basically the Discworld's version of Santa and Christmas. It's called Hogswatch. So you're following all these different characters. Death has to take over for the Hogfather because he has been assassinated by hitmen. So like it's all very silly. So there's all these different characters who are like trying to figure out what went wrong, like why is Hogswatch wrong this year? And it's such a fun book. But I think the audiobook made it such a great listening experience. Okay, my final category is very personal to me, I bet. I don't know, maybe other people would enjoy this too, but for me, I love hearing accents. I love listening to different accents. I just find it so engaging, but also very soothing. I don't know why. But for me, like listening to someone talk with a beautiful accent is very soothing and relaxing. So these are books that had narrators that had a really great accent. So the first up I want to mention is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Daré. I listened to this very recently, and it's a beautiful book. Like, I think this is a fantastic book in general, but the audiobook is so good, and I really recommend, if you're going to read it, you try to do the audio, because the way it's written is in kind of a dialect, and so I don't know about you, but for me, I sometimes struggle to read a dialect. I need to hear it so that I can like have the right rhythm to make it sound what it's supposed to sound like. So the audiobook is excellent for that. The narrator is fantastic. And she's Nigerian. She has a Nigerian accent. So it fits very well with the story that is set in Nigeria. And so like that alone is just spectacular. And this is a book about a girl who desperately wants to be able to get an education, and her mother has died, and she's the one who always fought for her to get an education, and her father just doesn't really know what to do with her. He needs money, so he marries her off. So she's forced into an early marriage when she's just 14, and it's like her experiences fighting for herself to be able to do the thing that she most wants, which is to be educated and become somebody, a girl with a louding voice. And it's beautiful, and the audiobook is spectacular. Next, I want to talk about the Benty Trilogy by Nnedi Okorafor. I love this series so much. I'd already read it with my eyes, and when I went back to read it again, when I added it to Build Your Libraries Level 9, I decided to check out the audiobook. Just since I'd already read it, I wanted to experience the audio, and oh my gosh. I had given it, I think, 4 stars originally, and the audiobook bumped it up to a 5-star. It was so good. So again, great narration. The narrator is, I want to say Nigerian, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And her voice was so incredibly beautiful and soothing. I loved it. I loved the audio so much that I just like wanted to start it over again when I finished it because it was so good. My only complaint though is that I own the bind up, and the audiobooks are only like the individual novellas. So like I had to get 3 different novellas to listen to the whole thing, but like it was worth it because the audiobook was so good. So the Benty Trilogy is all about a girl who her people don't leave the earth. They are very bound to the earth. And she really wants to go to this university. She gets accepted and decides that it's worth it to her to leave. So she goes to this university and shenanigans ensue, and I can't really talk about too much without giving away big plot points, so I'm not going to do that, but like it completely upends and changes her entire life, and it's done really well. Like the book itself is great. The audiobook though just adds so much more to it. It's really well done. Very good production value, excellent audiobook. The last audiobook I want to talk about is Anatomy, a Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This is a book about a Scottish girl who desperately wants to be a doctor. This is set in like the late 1800s. I think it's Victorian. And it's set in Edinburgh. And oh my gosh, the Scottish accent. I don't know if the narrator is Scottish, but either way, the accent was fantastic. The Scottish accent is one of my favorite accents. So as soon as I started the audio, I was like trying to decide if I was going to listen to the audiobook or just read with my eyes. And as soon as I heard the accent, I was fully immersed. I loved it. This is like one of my favorite books anyway. I would have loved it no matter what. But having the audiobook with a Scottish accent just elevated the story for me. This is a gothic thriller almost about grave diggers and like selling corpses on the black market for science and weird scientific experimentation, and it is so good. Like gruesome surgeries. It's really a really dark and like gothic story, and I loved it so much. I ate it up. was so good. I'm going to give you a bonus one because I'm realizing now that I left it off my list because I was trying to do 3 per category and it just hit me. But the Lord of the Rings audiobooks narrated by Andy Serkis. Like Tatiana Maslany, the man can do anything. His voices are so good. All the voices are distinct. They all sound so incredibly different that it's hard for me to accept that this is one man doing all of these voices. He's excellent at that. But also, if you're a fan of the movies and you loved that, the audiobooks are great because Andy Serkis is basically doing all the voices of the characters from the movie. So like his Samwise Gamgee sounds just like Sean Astin. His Frodo sounds just like Elijah Wood. So like his Pippin and Merry are perfect. Like all of the voices, his Gandalf, like all of them sound just like the movie. So if you love the movie and you want to experience the books, but you're intimidated perhaps by the writing, the size of the books, like they can be a lot. Let me recommend you the audio by Andy Serkis because he does a spectacular job. The voices will all be familiar to you. And like, it's a really great way to experience books. My daughter and I are listening to them now and we're almost done. We're on the last book and it's been a fantastic experience. So there you go. Those are some of my absolute favorite audiobooks. I listen to a lot of audio and these are the ones that have been really stand out for me. So let me know down below in the comments, what are your favorite audiobooks? Who is your favorite audiobook narrator? I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.